Today, we're going to talk about a case that absolutely gripped a community and really the entire nation. It's the tragic story of Nikki Bahati from Greater Noida. At the heart of this story is just an unthinkable act. A young mother, just 28 years old, was allegedly set on fire in her own home. She didn't make it. And the reason why, well, that's what blew this story wide open. So you have to ask, right? What could possibly lead to something so brutal? Well, the alleged motive that investigators found points to something that's been illegal in India for decades, since 1961, in fact. It all comes down to dowry. Okay, so to really get a handle on what happened here, we need to zoom out for a second. Because Nikki Bahati's story, as heartbreaking as it is, isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of this much larger, much darker problem that still casts a long shadow over the country. 292. Let that sink in. That's the official number of reported dowry deaths in India by the end of 2024. It's just the stark, brutal reminder that even though this practice is outlawed, it is still costing people their lives every single year.
So for anyone who might not be familiar with the term, what is dowry? Basically, it's property, cash, valuables, anything of value given by one family to another when a marriage happens. But here's the crucial part. It's been explicitly banned by the Dowry Prohibition Act since 1961. We're talking more than 60 years this has been illegal.
All right, so with that bigger picture in mind, let's bring it back down to the personal level. Let's talk about how this massive societal issue played out in one family's life, in the heartbreaking story of Nikki Bahati.
You know, this kind of tragedy rarely just happens out of the blue. It was a slow burn. It all started back in 2016 when Nikki and her sister married into the Bahati family. And for years, we're talking nearly a decade, they reportedly faced both physical and mental abuse, all tied to these constant demands for more dowry. It all came to a head on that terrible day, August 21st, 2025.
And get this, it's not like there was no dowry to begin with. A huge dowry was paid when they got married. We're talking a Scorpio SUV, a Royal Enfield motorcycle, cash, gold, the works. So this wasn't about not getting a dowry. It was about demands that just never, ever stopped.
And those demands just kept getting bigger and bigger. The final amount that Nikki's family was allegedly being pressured for was 36 lakh rupees. It was their inability to meet that final, massive demand that apparently triggered the horrific violence.
And this is just gut-wrenching. The whole thing happened in front of an eyewitness. It was Nikki's own 6-year-old son. He saw it happen. He's the one who later gave this absolutely chilling account to the police.
70%. Nikki Bahati had burns covering 70% of her body. I mean, the sheer brutality of it is hard to comprehend. She fought so hard, but the injuries were just too severe and she passed away in a New Delhi hospital.
So, in the wake of this absolute horror, all eyes turned to the police investigation and what would happen to the people accused. And the authorities, they moved fast. First, they arrested Nikki's husband, Vipin Bahati, and there was more drama there. He was actually injured in a police encounter while he was apparently trying to escape. Then, they arrested his mother, Daya Bahati, after she was identified in videos from the incident.
Now, before he was arrested, Vipin Bahati did something pretty audacious. He went on Instagram and posted a message to Nikki saying, "The world is calling me a killer, Nikki." It was this really calculated move, right? Trying to spin the whole thing as a suicide and make himself out to be the poor, grieving husband.
But that whole grieving husband act, it fell apart the second he was in custody. His statement to the police was reportedly cold, completely without remorse. He just said she died on her own. And that contrast, it just says everything, doesn't it? The public face versus what he said behind closed doors.
Of course, a story this shocking was never going to stay just a local news item. It immediately ignited this huge national conversation about the massive gap between the law and the everyday reality for so many women in India.
The public outrage was just immediate and intense. You saw people all over the country demanding stricter laws, calling for better protection for women. And of course, Nikki's own father was pleading for the absolute harshest punishment possible for the people responsible.
And really, this case just puts a massive spotlight on this deep, frustrating contradiction. You look at the law, and the Dowry Prohibition Act has been there since 1961. But then you look at the reality, and the demands, the violence, the deaths, they just keep happening. It's like two different worlds.
And that really leaves us with the biggest question of all, doesn't it? We have the laws. We see the public outrage flare up every time a story like this comes out. So what's it really going to take? What's the missing piece that will finally close that gap between the law and reality and put an end to this violence for good? Thanks for watching VibeSense.